And Russia's ambitions in Africa have just taken a striking leap forward. Eyeing the vast uranium riches of Niger, the Kremlin is moving swiftly to cement its influence in a country ruled by a military junta that is firmly aligned with Moscow at this point. And this isn't just about mineral extraction, it's a calculated geopolitical gambit that could reshape nuclear power dynamics worldwide.
In the heart of Africa, a quiet but powerful shift is unfolding. France, once the undisputed master of Niger's uranium, is being outplayed, and this time it's Russia moving the chess pieces. With a single nuclear power deal, Moscow has not only challenged France's grip on Niger, but also redrawn the map of global energy influence. How did Russia outsmart France in its own backyard? Let's break it down. Picture a nation sitting on the world's 7th largest stash of uranium, a treasure trove of atomic potential, easily capable of illuminating the grand boulevards of Paris, the industrious heart of Berlin, and the sprawling metropolis of Tokyo. Now picture that same nation's own homes falling into darkness as the sun sets, its progress shackled by a profound energy poverty. This is the paradox of Niger, a country rich in the fuel of the future, but starved of its benefits. Last month, a quiet revolution began. Niger inked a landmark deal with Russia to construct its very first nuclear power plant. The most audacious detail? The bill will be paid in the very uranium that Paris, the long-term beneficiary of Niger's resources, refused to share on equitable terms. While the Eiffel Tower continues to sparkle, powered in part by Niger's wealth, the colonial chains that kept Niger in the dark are being targeted, with plans to cut them one reactor at a time. For a full half-century, the relationship between France and Niger resembled that of a disposable battery. France, through its state-controlled nuclear giants, would pop the top on Niger's vast mineral wealth, extract the raw energy, and snap it shut, leaving little behind but dust and dependency. This cycle of extraction was as relentless as it was unequal. Nigerian uranium ore left the country on French cargo planes, fueling a nuclear network that is the bedrock of French energy independence. The only thing offered in return, beyond meager payments, were proposals to ship radioactive waste back to Niger, plans the African nation swiftly rejected. In the streets of Niamey, the capital, and across the land, the consequences of this energy deficit were a daily reality. Children strained to study by the flickering glow of candlelight, their futures dimmed by the lack of a simple light bulb. Hospitals, the front lines of public health, relied on the noisy, unreliable hum of diesel generators. The city's streetlights, when they worked at all, flickered like a swarm of tired fireflies, a poignant symbol of a nation's arrested development. Then came July 2023, a month that ripped the old rulebook to shreds. It began with a military coup that swiftly toppled the French-aligned government. But the real earthquake was geopolitical. A few weeks later, a seemingly innocuous one-page memo appeared on the website of Rosatom, Russia's state nuclear energy corporation. This polite PDF, written in the dry language of international agreements, set off diplomatic sirens from the corridors of power in Brussels to the presidential palaces of West Africa. Hidden within the fine print was something far more potent than a simple infrastructure deal. It was a declaration of independence, an exit ramp from the entire colonial power game that had defined Niger for generations. It wasn't just about electricity. It was about reclaiming sovereignty. To understand the depth of this shift, one must flash back to 1974 and the establishment of a framework cynically dubbed the Pact for the Continuation of Colonization. It was a fancy title for a raw deal, one that codified the deep-seated imbalance of power. France, through its corporate proxies, retained control over the uranium mines, the lifeblood of its nuclear industry. In exchange, Niger received a presidential guard and financial crumbs. The French company Orano, formerly known as Areva, ran the show. It operated the massive Somer open-pit mine in the desert city of Arlet and held the rights to the colossal Imararan deposit further south, one of the largest in the world. By 2022, Niger was a critical supplier, shipping over 2,000 tons of uranium annually, which accounted for a staggering 15% of France's total electricity generation. And for this strategic resource, what did Niger receive? A royalty rate of just 5.5%, locked into agreements that seemed immutable. When Niger's government, under pressure to deliver more for its people, dared to ask for a raise, Paris just shrugged. The message was clear and cold. A contract's a contract. This patronizing attitude ignored the hazardous legacy left behind: radioactive tailings blowing in the desert wind and contaminated water sources, a silent health crisis for the miners and residents of towns like Arlet. The spark that finally ignited the dry tinder of resentment came on July 26, 2023. Members of the Presidential Guard detained President Mohamed Bazoum, and the streets of Niamey erupted. Crowds surged through the capital, not with the banners of Western allies, but with Russian flags fluttering in the Sahelian sun, their chants a defiant roar. France, dégage! France, get out! The new military leaders wasted no time in dismantling the old order. French ambassador Sylvain Ide was declared persona non grata and expelled. The 1,500 French troops stationed in the country, once seen as guarantors of stability, were told to pack their bags. Orano's expatriate workers found their visas had become worthless pieces of paper at the airport. Within weeks, the colonial scaffolding that had survived since Niger's formal independence in 1960 folded faster than a cheap tent. The message from the new leadership was unequivocal. The uranium mines were being brought under national control, and new partners were welcome, but only on the condition that the value generated from Nigerian soil would finally stay home. Into this void stepped Russia. On July 8, 2025, Sergei Sivilev, Russia's energy minister, landed in Niamey. There were no patronizing sermons on democracy or lectures on governance. He came bearing a 30-page roadmap, a detailed and attractive proposal. The centerpiece of the offer was a 600-megawatt pressurized water reactor to be built on the banks of the Niger River, with a target completion date of 2034. This type of reactor is the most common worldwide, known for its reliable design, where water is kept under high pressure to prevent boiling, efficiently transferring heat to generate steam and electricity. But the deal was far more comprehensive. It included a 10-megawatt research reactor, a crucial tool for education and innovation, designed to allow local students to become nuclear engineers, rather than remaining as support staff for foreign geologists. Furthermore, the package included a radioisotope plant for cancer treatment. This was a profoundly humanitarian gesture in a country where cancer patients currently have to undertake expensive and arduous journeys to Morocco or India for radiation therapy. Soon, they might simply walk across town. Moscow's proposal was also a plan for local empowerment, stipulating that 80% of the workforce would be Nigerian, with training provided through Rosatom, scholarships at leading institutions in Moscow and Obninsk. And the price for this technological leap? A staggering $6 billion. Yet, the currency was what made the deal revolutionary. There would be no crippling debt denominated in foreign cash. Instead, payment would be simple: a fixed quantity of uranium ore delivered annually for 20 years. It was a direct swap, the rocks Niger couldn't use, exchanged for the watts it desperately needed. This move has redrawn the geopolitical chessboard in the Sahel. Chatham House, the renowned British think tank, aptly described the agreement as a textbook resource for infrastructure swap. Russia secures a long-term, stable supply of strategic uranium without depleting its cash reserves, while Niger gains the energy sovereignty it has craved for decades and a tangible opportunity to climb the value chain from a simple digger of ore to a designer of its own industrial future. In Washington and Paris, officials mumbled with predictable concern about proliferation risks, a familiar refrain used to caution developing nations against advanced technologies. But such arguments ring hollow in a country where only about 1 in 7 people has access to the electrical grid. For the vast majority of Nigerians, the abstract risk of proliferation is far less terrifying than the concrete reality of another night in the dark. Meanwhile, Russia's strategic arc of influence across the Sahel grows stronger. Mali signed a nearly identical nuclear deal in June 2024, and Burkina Faso followed suit in November. The package is consistent: research reactors, medical isotopes, and technical training, all paid for in gold or other valuable ores. From Moscow's perspective, this is the creation of a contiguous energy belt across West Africa, cinched together by Russian technology and know-how, in a region France once considered its exclusive sphere of influence. A closer look at the dollars and cents reveals the transformative potential of this single nuclear plant. Niger currently imports a massive 42% of its electricity from its neighbor, Nigeria. This dependency was starkly highlighted in early 2025 when Nigeria, facing its own grid pressures, drastically slashed those exports, plunging parts of Niger into immediate blackouts. The domestic supply is hardly better, relying on 2 aging and inefficient coal plants that cough black soot over Niamey. The result for the consumer is punishingly high electricity tariffs of 28 cents per kilowatt hour, 3 times the rate in Ghana and nearly quadruple that in South Africa. The proposed 600 megawatt nuclear plant, churning out a steady 4.8 billion kilowatt hours a year, would not only cover Niger's entire current demand, but provide a significant surplus. The economic ripple effects would be enormous. The national budget for expensive imported diesel and coal, well over $100 million a year, could be freed up for desperately needed clinics, roads, and schools. Reliable refrigeration could roll into villages, allowing farmers to preserve their crops and escape the cycle of produce rotting before it can reach the market. When you multiply these small but profound wins across millions of homes and businesses, the project starts to look less like a mere policy initiative and more like a genuine act of economic liberation. Of course, every sunrise casts shadows, and a project of this magnitude is not without its skeptics and significant risks. 3 major worries dominate the conversation. The first is cash, or rather, its equivalent in ore. $6 billion represents roughly a third of Niger's entire gross domestic product. If global uranium prices were to crash unexpectedly, Niger could find itself contractually obligated to shovel out more ore than it can sustainably mine, potentially trading one form of dependency for another. The second concern is security. The uranium mining regions in the north are already plagued by attacks from Al-Qaeda-linked groups like JNIM and affiliates of the Islamic State. Successfully guarding a state-of-the-art nuclear facility would require a security ring the size of a small city. A monumental task for any military, let alone one already stretched thin, fighting multiple insurgencies. The third is time. In the world of politics and development, 8 to 10 years is an eternity. Governments can fall, contracts can be renegotiated or abandoned, and public sentiment can swing dramatically. Yet, supporters of the deal shoot back with a compelling counter-argument. What is the alternative? Remaining perpetually hooked on the fickle goodwill of France and the unreliable power grid of Nigeria is not a strategy for success. It is a guaranteed gamble with a history of failure. While Niamey dreams of a brighter future, panic is simmering in Paris. The week Niger's new government revoked the operating permit for the massive Imouraren mine, Orano's stock plunged by a staggering 27%. 30,000 tons of measured uranium reserves, an asset valued at over €1 billion, vanished from Orano's annual report like a magician's rabbit. In the French refinery towns of Narbonne and Malvézy, unions are now fretting about the possibility of shutdowns and job losses. The French government, caught off guard, is scrambling to reopen talks with Kazakhstan and Namibia, but they are entering a seller's market. Prices are steeper, and the terms of new deals will be far shorter and less favorable. For the first time since the oil crises of the 1970s, France finds itself shopping for uranium not as a quasi-colonial power dictating terms, but like an ordinary consumer scrambling for last-minute gifts. The new reality was perfectly captured by Niger's new mines minister, Colonel Ousmane Abarchi, who deadpanned to a French television crew. Pay market price. The trucks roll. Until then, the ore stays home. This dramatic reversal is not just a Nigerian story. It is resonating across the continent. Scroll through social media and the story tells itself. The hashtag uranium for our people is trending from Dakar to Douala. It accompanies video clips of Russian engineers patiently teaching young Nigerians how to calibrate dosimeters, and photos of schoolchildren in lab goggles, grinning as if they have just met superheroes. In neighboring Benin and Togo, activists and commentators are openly asking why their leaders can't swing the same kind of hard bargain for their own natural resources. Even staunch critics of the military leaders in Niger quietly admit that the nuclear plant deal looks like a silver lining to a dark cloud. The public conversation has pivoted, moving beyond the tired discourse of coups and sanctions to the empowering language of contracts and development. It seems that a taste of dignity, of seeing one's own resources used for one's own people, is more satisfying than any imported ideology. The road ahead is long and uncertain. Bulldozers have not yet fired up their engines on the banks of the Niger River, but the initial groundwork has begun. Seismic crews are already probing the riverbanks near the site of the Kandaji Dam, a location that promises the necessary water for cooling the future reactor. At the University of Niamey, Russian language classes now have waiting lists longer than a Monday morning bus ride, a testament to where young people see their future. Across the capital, new billboards have appeared displaying a stylized atom hovering above the hopeful words, "Powered by Niger, for Niger." If the complex web of financing, security, and politics aligns, the first cooling tower will break ground in 2028. The reactor is projected to go live in 2034, and by 2040, Niger could be in the astonishing position of exporting surplus electrons to its neighbors, Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire. It's a breathtaking prospect. The country once used as international shorthand for famine and instability could morph into West Africa's primary power socket. It may sound audacious, but it is not impossible. South Korea pulled off a similar trick, building its first reactor in 1978 when it was still a developing nation, and is now a global exporter of nuclear technology. Stranger things have happened. If you want to watch resource-rich nations flip the script on old colonial power dynamics, hit subscribe and ring the bell. We will be here to follow every turbine that spins, every ton of uranium that is mined, and every dramatic twist in this unfolding plot. Do you think Niger is simply trading one master for another? Swapping a French boss for a Russian one? Or is this a genuine step towards sovereignty? Drop your take in the comments below, because this conversation is nowhere near its final chapter. For half a century, Niger powered Europe, while its own people remained in the dark. Now, under the vast Sahelian skies, a new skyline is being sketched, one of cooling towers, where military garrisons once stood, of engineers, where exploiters once strutted, and of megawatts, where dusty memoranda once gathered dust. France believed Niger would be content with the crumbs from its own table forever. Russia came to the table and offered a straight swap, rocks for reactors, and Niger, seeing a chance to finally control its own destiny, said yes. Whether this ambitious plant becomes a shining beacon of African self-determination or a tragic cautionary tale of unforeseen consequences still depends on the very same force that toppled the old guard, the stubborn, resilient will of the Nigerian people. But one thing is absolutely certain. The uranium that once crossed borders solely as raw ore is finally coming home in the form of electricity. And for the first time in its modern history, the people of Niger have a credible hope that the lights will not go out.